The tension in courtroom 17B was like a drawn violin string ready to snap. Everyone turned toward the heavy oak doors as they creaked open, and Harold Langston, one of the city's most powerful millionaires, walked in flanked by his legal team. Except today, there was only one man beside him. His assistant, a quiet young man named Ethan Cole, clutched a thick folder to his chest, walking nervously in Harold's wake. Harold's usual lawyer, the flashy and always composed Frederick Kane, was nowhere to be seen. Whispers rolled across the courtroom like a gathering storm. The prosecution looked smug. Journalists shifted for a better angle, and Harold, his silver hair neatly combed back. Dark suit, pristine, looked oddly serene. Judge Miriam Halbrook adjusted her glasses and called the session to order. "Mr. Langston, where is your counsel?" Ethan turned to Harold, unsure if he should speak. But before he could decide, the courtroom doors slammed open again. Frederick Kane strode in. Late as usual, his $1,000 shoes clicking confidently. He made it halfway to the defense table before pausing and turning slowly toward Harold. "I can't do this," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "This case is too toxic. I'm removing myself as counsel." Gasps echoed. One of the reporters dropped her pen. Judge Halbrook's eyebrows rose in sharp disbelief. Harold simply nodded, his face unreadable. "You can't just abandon your client mid-trial," the judge said sternly. "I can when he's lied to me." "Your Honor," Kane said coldly, though no evidence had ever confirmed that, "I will not be part of defending a man whose hands are likely far from clean." And with that, Frederick Kane turned his back on Harold Langston and walked out of the courtroom, his perfectly tailored suit fluttering like a flag of betrayal. Silence, cold and absolute. Ethan looked up at Harold, the man who had paid for his college, the man who gave him a chance when no one else would even look at his resume, the man who, despite his wealth, never acted superior, only busy, tired, worn. Judge Halbrook sighed. "Mr. Langston, unless you have alternate representation, I will have to postpone the proceedings." "I'll do it," Ethan said suddenly, surprising even himself. His voice rang out clear and defiant. "I'll defend him." Eyes snapped toward the young man in the second-hand blazer, standing awkwardly with trembling hands. "You're not a lawyer." "From Columbia Law 2 years ago," Ethan replied, his confidence rising. "I passed the bar. I've just never practiced. Mr. Langston hired me as a legal assistant because I lacked trial experience, but I am licensed." The judge regarded him for a long moment. "This is a multi-million-dollar fraud case. Mr. Cole, you'll be facing the DA's top team." "I know, Your Honor, but someone has to stand with him. I believe in him." The judge's eyes softened just slightly. "Very well," she said. "Finally, but if I sense incompetence, I will remove you myself. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan said, feeling the weight of the entire courtroom pressed down on his shoulders. As the trial resumed, Ethan sat beside Harold, heart racing. The prosecution came out swinging, presenting complex financial records, damning witness statements, and a narrative painting Harold Langston as a greedy tycoon who had orchestrated a fraudulent investment scheme to enrich himself while bankrupting others. Ethan listened closely, took notes in bursts, and asked for a recess just before the final witness. In the small conference room behind the courtroom, Harold sipped coffee, still calm. "Why didn't you tell me you were accused of fraud?" Ethan asked softly. Harold looked at him. "Because it's not true. But I knew that if I told you, I might scare you off, and I needed at least one person I could trust in my corner. Then tell me everything, every detail." And Harold did, for hours that night. They worked late into the evening after court adjourned. Ethan dissected every document, every contract. He found inconsistencies in the testimonies, tiny ones. The prosecutors had missed Esau patterns, mails that were doctored, timelines that didn't line up. The next day in court, Ethan stood. "A little taller, Your Honor," he began. "The prosecution claims Mr. Langston redirected investor funds, but Exhibit D, their own evidence, shows a payment sent to a company supposedly owned by Mr. Langston only. That company didn't exist until after the funds were moved. That's not fraud by my client, that's a frame job." The courtroom stirred. Ethan called expert witnesses who had been ignored. He re-interviewed former employees, tracked one all the way to Nevada who admitted under oath that he had falsified numbers pressured by a rival CEO, a man who had been suspiciously quiet in the whole case. Each day, Ethan grew stronger. His voice stopped shaking. His objections became sharper, more precise. The judge began to nod at his motions. The jury watched him intently. He was no longer the assistant in the back of the room. He was fighting like a lawyer who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. On the final day, during closing arguments, Ethan stood in front of the jury, his palms open. Mr. Langston may be rich. That doesn't make him guilty. In this courtroom, money is not evidence. Facts are, and the facts show my client was framed by those who envied his success. He didn't steal from his investors, he was stolen from. He turned, his voice lowering. I know because I've sat beside this man for 2 years. I know the kind of man he is. He's not perfect, but he doesn't deserve to be destroyed for something he didn't do. I defended him because he once believed in me when I had nothing. All I ask is you give him the same chance. When he sat down, Harold placed a hand on his shoulder. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you. 3 hours later, the jury returned. On all charges, we find the defendant, Harold Langston, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. The press shouted questions. Flashbulbs exploded. Harold closed his eyes and let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging in quiet relief. But all attention turned to Ethan Cole, the young assistant, who had stood up in a courtroom full of power and fear and said, I'll defend him. Outside the courthouse, a reporter thrust a microphone in Ethan's face. How did you do it? You've never argued a case before. I just told the truth, Ethan replied, blinking in the sunlight. That's what lawyers are supposed to do, right? Later that night, in Harold's penthouse, where celebration drinks were poured and friends gathered, Harold tapped a fork against his glass. I want to make an announcement, he said. Ethan Cole is no longer my assistant, as of this moment. He's partner at Langston & Cole Legal Group. The room broke into applause. Ethan, stunned, looked around. But I've only tried one case, and you won it, Harold smiled, when no one else would even try. Years later, that moment would become a legend in the legal world. The young man who stood when others ran, the assistant who became a lawyer in one trial, and the millionaire who was saved not by money but by loyalty. And in every courtroom Ethan stepped into afterward, he carried those 4 words like a badge of honor. I'll defend him